friends, welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Cligenpeel. I want to thank you so much for listening to the show. Your feedback has been invaluable, so thank you so much for that. Of course, we would love to hear from all of you, so please reach out to me directly at paigecligenpeel@gmail.com. Now, as a reminder, you can listen to this show on all major podcast platforms, and if you want to watch the video version, check it out on the HomeWord YouTube page. Of course, no matter where you watch or listen, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give the show a rating and leave a review. Today, we have another amazing guest for you. Her name is Dr. Suzanne Levy. I had the pleasure of sitting in on her presentation of ABFT. I found the information she presented to be so helpful that I actually started implementing it with my own family as a wife and a mother, so I know that you can benefit from it as well. So here's a little bit more about Suzanne Levy. She is an internationally renowned licensed clinical psychologist and co-developer of the ABFT, which stands for Attachment-Based Family Therapy. She is the co-owner of the ABFT International Training Institute. She's an international presenter on the ABFT, resilience, adolescent depression, their development, and even their substance use. Along with her colleagues, Drs. Guy and Gary Diamond, Dr. Levy has written the first book on ABFT, Attachment-Based Family Therapy for Depressed Adolescents, published by the American Psychological Association. So, if you haven't already picked up on it, we are going to be talking about attachment today. This is an area of parenting that we all need to be educated on, because we all have attachment styles and attachment wounds that impact us in our relationship life as well as our parenting. So make sure that you stay tuned to after the conversation where I share some of my takeaways. So join me now as I have an awesome conversation about attachment with Dr. Suzanne Levy. Well, Suzanne, I'm so excited that you're joining me here today. Thanks for joining us in this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So I would love to just jump right in and talk about attachment. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it is and why it's so important and its impact on our kids?
Sure. So attachment is really about describing the relationship between caregivers and their kids. And it's formed through our interactions with our kids. So we can have a secure attachment, we can have an insecure attachment. And it's really based on when kids have what we call an attachment need, which when it's an infant, it could be they're cold, they're hungry, they're tired, they're afraid, they're scared. They instinctively turn to their caregivers for help and support. And how a caregiver responds to their attachment needs is going to shape this kid's own sense of feeling safe and protected. So when this kid has this attachment need and they turn to their caregiver, their parent, if their parent is responsive and attuned to this kid's need, the kid's going to feel comforted, protected, loved. That's going to start to help them kind of build up this feeling of being worthy of loved and protected. This allows them, as they get more mobile, as they get to our toddler age and our elementary school age, to start going out and exploring the world. And then if they hit a spot where they're scared or upset, they run back to their caregivers. And if their caregivers time and time again are mostly responsive and attuned to their needs, that what happens is this kid begins to really believe I'm worthy of love and protection. The world is a safe place, and that those who love me are going to be there to support me and protect me. And that leads kids to be more likely, as they move forward in life, to reach out for support and help. When they're struggling, they're upset, when relying on themselves or their friends isn't enough, they're more likely to turn back to their parents for that help and support. When parents don't respond in that responsive or attuned way a good amount of the time, and don't acknowledge when they don't respond in that way, kids feel alone. They come to believe I can't rely on my caregiver for help and support. I'm in this kind of by myself. And then they build up these kind of what we call defense mechanisms to not get hurt more. And they don't turn to their caregivers, and they might question their worthiness of love and protection, or even believe they're not worth that. And that puts them at risk for mental health problems. We know there's a lot of research that shows that when kids are struggling with something and they can turn to their parents for help and support, and their parents are warm and sensitive to their needs, it's actually a protective mechanism. It can help kind of help them manage those things that are distressing so it doesn't escalate and get worse.
So, what's a good example for that demonstrates a parent responding to a need that their child is having? Let's just say it's like a preschooler need. What does that look like?
So, if we have a preschooler who's gets really frustrated, right, over their toy breaking, the parent who's responding to their need is going to take that moment to bend down, meet them eye to eye, and say, I know you're really mad right now. It really is hard when our things break. How are you feeling? Right? So we can name the feeling. We want to give our kids space to talk about it. Maybe we, with a preschooler or toddler, we're going to offer a hug for comfort, sit with them. Maybe we need to breathe with them if they're really having trouble calming down, but we stay with them until the emotion subsides and we're with them in their emotion. And then they all of a sudden are okay and they run off and they go across the room and it's over, right? And so we help them to calm down. We respond to their need. We help them manage the emotion in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So teenagers obviously look slightly different than this. So what is some examples you can provide on how we can lean into the need of a teen when it's expressed?
I mean, in some ways it's the same, which is when we see our teens upset, saying, hey, I notice you're upset. Do you want to talk? If they don't want to talk yet in that moment, it's saying, I'm here when you're ready to talk. Sometimes, being in the car with your teen is the best time to do these conversations. It's easier when they're not having to look right at you, when they're maybe sitting next to you or in the back seat. But it's saying, I see that you're upset. I'm here for you and want to talk with you about it. I want to help you through this. And that as they do start opening up, it's about being non-judgmental. It's about not putting our opinion in or trying to problem solve. It's really about validating how your kid feels, giving them a space just to kind of share their feelings. Sometimes that's all kids need, is just a place to kind of dump their emotions, to vent, right? And for as the parent to be able to say, this really sucks. I know I hear how much it sucks. I hear how much you're hurting. It's really awful that you have to go through this. And sometimes that's all a teen needs, to feel heard, to then be able to pick themselves back up and go deal with whatever that situation is. And sometimes they need your help managing it, but no kid is going to let you help them problem solve if they don't feel heard and validated by you first as a parent.
So, I mean, what I've heard you say, and it crosses lines depending on, not even dependent on age. It's like a parent is establishing that connection by just physically being physically being there and addressing the need of the emotional engagement. So they're struggling with something. So you help them define it, and then you come alongside them. So it's like just being present and defining some of those emotions is a big step for this step towards attachment, secure attachment, and an overall. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's research to show that it is through our parents attending to our needs that we as people learn how to even regulate our emotions, right? Think about a kid who's having a tantrum. If nobody's attending to their tantrum, it just goes on and on until they just exhaust themselves, versus kids having a tantrum and that parent leans in and is there with them and helps them regulate and calm. That's how that kid over time is going to learn to regulate themselves when they're feeling panicked or upset about something.
Wow. So you just brought up a good point, because I know there's sometimes we are told as parents to not address the tantrum, like not even to acknowledge it. But you're saying there are actually occasions when we should. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think if the tantrum is an act of manipulation and it's an act of manipulation, you might not attend to it.
Surely not, right?
But initially, we do need to lean in and attend. We need to understand what is happening. We need to reassure our child, yes, this is frustrating. We have to acknowledge the emotion they're having, right? I know that you're mad. It's okay that you're mad. These things are hard. Can we try to take a deep breath together, right? Can you talk to me? Can you use your words? Tell me what's happening, right? So we first try to address and be with the child in the emotion. But if it continues to carry on, there is a time at which we might need to disengage, right? I have an 8-year-old myself. He is somebody who ruminates. He will ruminate and ruminate, and I will lean in and address the emotion and we'll get calm, and then he'll bring it back again. And at some point I have to say to him, honey, we've talked about this. Talking about it now is not helpful. My job is to protect you, so I'm not going to engage anymore. Right? We've talked it through. We need to move forward now. So there is times where parents have to stop engaging, but when a kid is really dysregulated, we first need to lean in, provide that safety and comfort, and then maybe sometimes give our kids a little bit of space too.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. That's awesome. So let's talk about the parents and the way they were raised and how sometimes they bring that generational dysfunction into the way that they parent. Is there a connection between those things?
Definitely, right? We can only give what we get, right? So our own attachment histories impact us, right? So if we ourselves grew up with parents who didn't attend to our emotional needs, we've learned to kind of stuff them away. Typically, that impacts us in being uncomfortable with other people's emotions. We're less likely to seek help and support. So that interacts with our kids' needs in several different ways. One, if we're uncomfortable with closeness and intimacy ourselves, when we see our kid upset, that can overwhelm our system and make us kind of turn away from our children, which then leaves them hanging with nobody to take care of their emotions. Additionally, when we're struggling with something, and maybe our kids reacting, and then we get kind of in this dance with our kids, parents who have that insecure attachment style are less likely to reach out for help and say, hey, I'm stuck. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and get help from others. Whereas parents who are securely attached are more likely, they could still get in entanglements with their kid and get stuck, but they're more likely at some point to be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and turn to their support network and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, please help me. And they're going to get the support they need to maybe either change how they're engaging with their kid, get a moment of respite to calm their own system down so that they can re-engage in a healthy way. So our own attachment styles really impact how we approach our kids, our own comfort with closeness and intimacy and emotions, and how we're going to respond when we see our kids emotional and in need.
Yeah. And so maybe that's part of the question is like, how do we recognize that we're coming from an insecure attachment and how that impacts our family? Like, is there anything that you can help us identify that?
I mean, I think certainly thinking about when you were a kid yourself, who could you go to? When you were upset about something, could you go to your parents? Did you go? When you went, how did they respond to you? Was that comforting? Did that make you feel seen? If it wasn't, how did that impact you? Did it impact your own feelings of worthiness, of love and protection? How did it shape your own comfort with emotions, right? And then thinking about, if you didn't get what you needed as a kid and you weren't comfortable with emotions and it did make you question your worthiness, how have you carried that forward into your adulthood? Half the battle is awareness. Once you're aware of your patterns, there are skills any parent can learn to help their kid, regardless of what their own patterns were. They just have to be willing to take that step to do something different.
Yeah, I love that question because in your seminar, as we were learning as clinicians, as kind of the moderator between family members and their kids, I loved your question of who do you go to or why do you not go to your parents when you're in need, or who do you go to when you have needs? I love that because that's transformative in my marriage. That's transformative in the way I raise my kids. But it also indicates that there can be, and you referred to it as ruptures in trust and trust broken. So explain a little bit about what that looks like in a parent-child relationship when there's ruptures.
Yeah. So ruptures is really kind of a big overarching concept. So there can be, the way we define them as ruptures are things that have happened in the relationship that get in the way of this kid going to their caregiver for help and support. They can be little. So we have ruptures that we call attachment injuries, which is when parents kind of miss the boat on how to respond in a moment, or are misattuned, or fail to kind of give their kid empathy or lean into their emotions. Maybe they're quick to problem solve or dismiss their emotions or say, you shouldn't be upset about that. Or maybe you're quick to point out the positives of your kid's situation when they're really wanting just to kind of spill their feelings. So those are like the little things. There can also be bigger things. So when abuse happens and you don't feel protected by the other parent, when a parent gets really ill or dies, that could be a huge rupture to deal with. So there's these bigger attachment kind of traumas. A parent abandons a kid, is addicted to drugs, and isn't able to protect and attend to their kid in the way that they need. These are bigger things that really kind of fundamentally break the trust in the relationship and negatively impact often kind of the kid's own mental health as well, that this becomes a struggle for this kid's own mental health. So there really is a range. I think the important thing to know is every parent engages in ruptures. You can be the most well-intentioned, meaning parent, but you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, because one, you can never mind read what does somebody actually need in a moment. And as parents, we're human and we're stressed out and we've got things to attend to. And so, I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've only been a parent for 8. And, I know all the right things to do, but when I'm really stressed and running late in the morning and have a meeting I have to get onto, and my kid is not getting his socks and shoes on, and I've told him for the 20th time, I can lose my cool. I know as I'm doing it, I'm like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, because I'm the parent and I'm supposed to stay regulated, but I'm also human and I'm angry in the moment. And so it's okay also to model sometimes we lose our cool. What we always say to folks is it's not about, you can't get it right 100% of the time. And it's not important that you do. It's what do you do when you get it wrong?
Yeah.
Are you taking accountability?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big piece of it. Yeah, go ahead.
I loved, it was literally a transformative moment for me when you talked about the statistic of how often we had to get it right in order to have healthy, well-adjusted kids. Can you share that with the audience?
Yeah. So the research says that in order to form a secure attachment with your kid, you've got to get it right at least 40% of the time. But there's also something important you have to do the 60% of the time you don't.
I know,
right?
Exactly. But let's just take a moment and just say, praise the Lord that 40% is that number, because I can tell you the number of times I've gotten it wrong. But the fact that then 60% of the times, what do you do? And you go into this. So go into what you do after that when we mess up.
When we mess up, we've got to own it and take responsibility. And we've got to say to our kid, I just messed up. I shouldn't have yelled at you. I was frustrated, and it's okay that I was frustrated, but it's not okay that I yelled at you. I'm the adult. It's my job to keep you safe. I should have gotten myself together. What was that like for you that I just yelled at you? So we have to own it, take responsibility. We need to lean into what was our kid's experience. We need to apologize, and we need to try to do better. And that's what I model. And it's modeling for our kids exactly what we want them to do with their friends, when they hurt somebody else, right? When they mess up, we want them to take responsibility, apologize, and try to do better. And so by modeling that and really trying to do better, that's what's going to create that secure attachment. It's that open dialogue. And if you do that, then you're going to have a kid like I do, who, when I lose my cool, he'll be like, Mommy, you're the adult. You're not supposed to do that. He'll call me out on it, right? Yeah. And I'll be like, you're right. I shouldn't have lost my cool. I'm really sorry. What was that like for you? And we get it back together.
I just love that repentance, forgiveness dynamic as well. And just modeling failure for our kids, that we can model disappointment in our own behavior. We can model the mistakes in our choices, but that we go back to our child and we tell them, I messed up. I am so sorry. And in that, is that part of the reparation, like the repair in the relationship, and just admitting your faults?
Exactly. That is the repair. Parents who are parenting from a securely attached place do that all the time. That is a natural part of the process. The difference between the securely attached parents and the insecurely attached parents are the securely attached parents are taking ownership. They're doing the repair. The insecurely attached parents are engaging in the same negative behaviors and then never addressing it. Either just completely moving forward like it never happened, or spending some time actually being angry at the kid and either being really angry at them or kind of icing them out and ignoring them. But they never address the rupture. They never take ownership. They never check in with their kid about how they feel. They never apologize. And they just keep doing it again and again. They're not trying to improve on their behavior.
Do you know, that makes me think that then this is where kids are raised to not trust their own intuition, right? If the adult is
Mhm.
telling them they're a bad kid, and yet the kid is like, hold on, my parents just made a huge mistakes, but not acknowledging it, it's almost creating a
Mhm.
dissonance between the child trusting themselves, right? Is there something to
Mhm.
that in your research?
I mean, we haven't looked at that about trust in ourselves, but what we know is when kids feel like, my parent just made this mistake, what the heck? I can't trust it maybe that it's I can't trust myself, but it's also now when I'm really struggling, I also don't trust them. I
Yeah,
don't trust
sure.
that they can take care of me. I don't trust that they can respond to my needs. And so they shut
Hmm.
that down. And that then means that this kid is dealing with their distress, their struggles on their own. And that puts them at risk for depression, anxiety, suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. So we're talking about like things that parents can implement in their own homes, right? The practice of asking forgiveness and mistakes and it just even acknowledging that. But you're also talking from a clinician's perspective. In fact, you and your scientific partners as well have created an attachment-based family therapy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, attachment based family therapy was a family therapy originally developed for adolescents, which kind of 12 and up, where they were struggling with depression and suicide. And it's a family therapy to kind of treat the family. And our kind of going in position is that oftentimes when kids are struggling with these big mental health issues, they've stopped going to their caregivers for help and support. They're trying to go at this alone. And there might be lots of things that are contributing to their mental health distress. There could be, you know, a genetic predisposition. It could run in their family, right? So there's pieces of it that you can't control. It might be getting bullied at school or school distress. For some kids, it's stuff that's happened with their parents that's contributing to their distress. For other kids, it's not about stuff that's happened with their parents, it's all this other stuff. But because of these little ruptures, right? Because maybe they've tried to go to their parent and their parents really quick to problem solve or point out the positive, that it's not comforting to go to their parents. So they've stopped going to them and now they're trying to deal with their issues on their own. So in our
Mm,
therapy, our first goal is let's figure out why this kid is no longer going to the parent, understand that better, get everybody to talk ready to talk about it, and then bring parents and kids back together so that they can work through these issues that have gotten in the way of trust and love, that have gotten in the way of this kid being able to rely on the parent or turn to their parent for help. Once we've talked through those issues, we then, parents are in a better position to support their kids. And then we help the parents and kids talk about all these other issues that are contributing to this kid's distress and to help them get back on track with their life, and manage and kind of have that balance between autonomy, which teenagers should have, but also that backdrop of attachment.
hmm. And so, what I love about this too is that even though these are things that hopefully parents have been practicing, the attachment, the secure, meeting the needs, that even if they haven't been, they still can start today. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
it's never
Yeah.
too late. I mean, we do this
Hmm.
work with adults as well. It's never too late to talk about what's gone wrong, right? Unintentionally, and to change how you are going to act with one another moving forward.
Hmm. Hmm. So, would you tell our audience where they can find you, your information, and even some of these resources for ABFT?
Sure. So you can find us online at www.abftinternational.com. We have some resources for parents, but you can also feel free to reach out to me. We have an info@abftinternational.com email address that you can reach us at. And we are starting to also do some more parent talks and things like that as well, to help parents kind of better understand how do I help my kid in the here and the now, even before they get to this place where they're having difficulties?
Mm-hmm. Mm, yes, of course. Well, this is wonderful information. I know parents are going to be able to use this and implement it in their own homes, regardless of the age of their kiddos. So, thank you so much for providing this information for us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, guys, I hope that you appreciated a little bit more about attachment. I mean, honestly, this is again something that we have all experience because we were raised as children into adults. And so it's impacted everything that we are, whether relationally, in our marriages, and especially as our parenting. I think it comes out even more when we start raising kids, when kids start having to be behaviorally modified or have conversations, or they're having their tantrum in the middle of Target. And you're like, what the heck do I do? Everyone's staring at me. This is real life for me, friends. I remember this. So our attachment style is based on how we were raised by our parents. But the way that we parent can be altered than the way that we were raised. I want you to hear that. Just because you have been raised a certain way does not mean that you have to parent that way. I know for me personally, I was raised with an insecure attachment. My parents did the best that they could, but they were also coming from an understanding of the way that their parents raised them. So now as a parent, I have noticed, and maybe you guys do as well in some ways, that when my kids especially were younger and they had these emotional outbursts, that in order to, I guess, teach them or discipline them, that I emotionally wanted to pull away. I wanted to separate from them, almost I imagine as a punishment to teach them, you don't act that way. If you do, I'm going to walk away from you emotionally and potentially even physically. The problem is, friends, that starts teaching our kids that their behavior makes our love for them conditional. This again is why it is so very important for us to figure out what our attachment style is and then what needs and relationship building we are having with our own kids. I know that Suzanne talked a little bit about that, about how to determine your own. And I think one of the questions is, where do you go when you have an emotional need? When you have a stressor, when you have a struggle, what is your first instinct? If you start thinking to yourself, I have no one I can trust, I can't share any of this information, and you start isolating, that might be an indicator that your attachment might be insecure. Again, good news, friends, we can change the way that we attach to relationships. And that's through time that especially should be had with other conversations with people that you can trust, counselors, therapists. Just start having those conversations. I love resources like this podcast or books, because I know for me, that's how I started to change the way that I interacted with my kids and I parented, is that I had mentors. I was able to ask them questions. I've gone to counseling myself in order to not only get over the wounds that I experienced, but also how I can change. So that's a little bit more of my backstory when it comes to attachment. But let's talk about some of the takeaways that Suzanne gave us today. I think one of the first things that really stood out to me is that addressing the need of our child is showing them that they are worthy of love and protection. So when they have that when they're little, they are going to grow to understand that there are trusted adults out there. And we, as their parent, are hopefully one of them. That starts creating a solid foundation of identity development. And so that means that when your kid has a blow up or that they have this huge emotional reaction to something, you are able to come alongside them. I know when they're young, it's easier to go face to face, bend down on their level, and help them define maybe what that emotion is, whether they're sad, they're angry, they're disappointed. I always tell people that I'm in relationship with, whether clients or someone at my church, that go to Pinterest, go online and Google an emotion wheel. They even have them in emojis now, which I love that because I'm such a visual. Give our kids language with how they feel. And us as adults, since we're supposed to be models and regulators of our own emotions in positive, healthy ways, we can model for them. What does anger look like? What does disappointment look like? And help them point or identify. Because the easier it is to identify your emotions, the easier it is to heal and move on from that. So that's one way we can meet the emotional needs of our kids. And that doesn't just mean when they're young, right? Like, teens, they have big emotions. I don't know if you have teens in your household yet, but if you don't, come to my house because I can tell you they have big emotions. And even my kids, who I feel like I've done a decent job of giving them emotional language, they still don't always know how to use words or to identify their emotions. So we're still doing this, even at adolescence, right before they're leaving my home. Help them define, meet them where they're at, identify their emotions, and don't be scared of the emotions. Go deep with them. Allow them to experience it so that you can continue to show them that they are safe and your love is not conditional. Another thing that I took away as well, and again, this is something that hopefully I've been practicing, is first off, The 40%, did anyone else pick up? I was literally celebrating when I heard that in session about how we only have to do it 40% of the time. We only have to do it well. Yes, friends, that's exciting because again, I am constantly making mistakes. But the big takeaway in this is not only do we just have to do it well some of the time, the big takeaway is when we mess up, which we will do often, apologize, lean in with your kid and say, dude, I totally messed up. I'm so sorry for yelling at you. I was emotionally reactive. Now, we're not rationalizing our behavior. We're addressing the incorrect response that we had to them. When you do that, that builds trust, that makes the kids feel safe, and it makes them feel valuable enough to be treated with respect. If we're never acknowledging that we make mistakes, that makes them feel like they're not only safe with us, but that their emotions mean nothing. We're able to come alongside them and completely flip that script just in the way that we can apologize to them. I love that. And even though it is humbling for us, and even though, let's be honest, our kids probably brought us to the point where we had a big emotional reaction, but hey friends, we have to model what it looks like when we make mistakes. That is a great life lesson for our kids. So I hope that this episode has been super encouraging. I hope that it has equipped you to have some of these conversations. Talk to your spouse, talk to your kids, talk about this episode with them, about how you can do a better job of coming alongside them to meet their needs, to address their emotions, to make them feel safe and loved and valuable, because that's what we get to do as parents, even on those hard days. Friends, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. We continue to have conversations that hopefully equip and encourage you in and outside your home. Please continue to tune in. So we'll see you next time for another edition of Embracing Your Season.